character consistency. This is a real challenge. It's been a real challenge for me. And I know it's something that many artists struggle with. And when you're drawing a comic book, for instance, it's really important that your characters look the same throughout the whole story. And this is one of those things that I've been criticized for many times. So I thought, oh man, I got to find a way to tackle it. Getting right into the technical, the one fundamental skill that you're going to have to practice is your construction. And that means you should be able to construct any shape of a head at any angle and understand how to draw a head at any angle. You can't do this without understanding the fundamentals of construction. You can't have something look consistent as it rotates. What's going to help your characters look consistent is making sure that the distance between things like the eyes and the nose are consistently the same. And so that in one frame, your character doesn't have a really long nose, and then in the next frame or the next image in your image sequence, your character's nose doesn't have like some weird, oddly, differently shaped nose. These are the kind of things that practicing your fundamentals of construction are going to help you to understand. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out many of my other videos here on my YouTube channel or in my easy art lessons that will talk you through the real-time step-by-step process of drawing a face at any angle. Every single face that you've ever seen drawn anywhere has this underlying construction of how the shapes are fitting together so that there's a model sheet. And that's essentially what we're going to be drawing in today's video, is a model sheet of our character from multiple different angles with different expressions so that we can have consistency of our character across our entire comic book or animation. And there's going to be some people out there that are going to go, nah, I don't need to worry about that. It's not going to help me make art that looks really awesome. It's not going to impress anybody that I know my construction, right? Well, if you don't know your construction, all of your artwork will flounder and you'll be just like one of those comments that's saying, oh, I don't know why I'm not ever getting any better. Well, it's because you're not practicing construction. And when you want to understand stylization as well, you want to get things like this down. You want to be able to draw shapes at different angles. And that means understanding a little bit of the three-dimensionality of it. And practicing things like this is going to help you with more advanced drawing on paper, and drawing really highly detailed painted artwork. Every single face, as I said, in any animation or comic book has this strong understanding of the fundamentals of construction underneath the big detailed image that you see in the final painting. Don't skip the fundamentals, man. All right, that said, let's talk about character sheets. Let's talk about character consistency. So before I sit down to do a book, in this case, I was planning out Creed number 3, a sequel to the successful Indiegogo comic that came out in 2022. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit of a different hairstyle for the character. Because I noticed that in the feedback for books 1 and 2, some people were saying, the character kind of looks a little inconsistent at times. This is a stylization thing, and I realized that's one of the things I really wanted to work on. And so this solution that I'm about to discuss in this video may help you if you're doing something like a comic book and you want to work on your character consistency. So what I had done was I had decided that I really wanted to update the character to a more modern look. I was going to give him a different hairstyle and ultimately just a little bit more punk rock, a little bit more modern, but not really modern, because he's kind of like a 90s. He has like a 90s shaved head, on the sides. And then it's kind of tied back into the back, like a mohawk that's tied back. And mostly that's because there was like a timeline split where this character became like a different version than the character that existed in the 90s. On a personal note, that's just because I had changed so much from my, teenage self that I was when I had created the character back in the 90s. His original character was like a kind of a hippie influenced type of a character. And I wanted to bring him into like something that felt a little bit more, I guess you would I hate the word edgy. Don't ever use that word with me. I've heard it so many times from executives while designing characters for video games. I don't ever want to hear the word edgy again, but I would just say that it gave him a little bit more of an attitude or a little bit more personality. And it seemed to me like a 90s kind of a vibe, Norse or Viking style haircut. I was really big into the Viking series on Netflix. And so I wanted to have that consistency. But, if you're going to change something about your character, if you're going to work on trying to make the character consistent throughout your whole book, then, I mean, you're going to be drawing this character, 50, 60, maybe 100 times just per book. So it's important to have a character sheet. And what I decided to do was to go through and grab all of my favorite images from the previous books and update them so that there was a consistency across one sheet. All of these images are on one sheet, and they're the basic shot of the character from multiple different angles, doing different expressions. And this kind of a thing can be really valuable to you if you have a kind of an older version of your character, or maybe you've got a bunch of panels from various different books that you've drawn. It's valuable to go through and just grab just the headshots. This is digital, right? So what I've done is, obviously, I've taken the characters, just headshots and silhouettes and even body proportions to try to get more consistency with the character. My plan was to create all of these different shots so that I could use it as a reference guide, but also quite literally you could copy and paste the heads from this character sheet and simply change the expression, change the lighting, and get tons of mileage out of this. And if you're talking about saving time, which is very important when you're doing a comic, when you're talking about saving time, this is huge. I mean, consider that, there's a ton of dialogue in a story. And if you've got a very, Creed is a comical book. I mean, there's a lot of comedy. It's existential comedy. So you got a lot of characters bantering. You got a lot of characters going back and forth on things. Their expressions are going to be important. The way that one character delivers a line and then the other character reacts, that's going to be important. So having these collections of character headshots is going to be super valuable if I ever do get around to actually doing that third book. Just to add clarity, because I know there are going to be people who comment, and I know there are a lot of Creed fans out there, and I know there will be people who comment and say, well, where is that third book? When is that coming? And I'm just going to tell you now, not for some time, dude, because here's the thing. I'm working on a video game now. We got a publishing deal. I've got a team of 5 people, a lot of people relying on me to develop this Twilight monk Metroidvania that we're working on. So that's really hogging all of my time. You have no idea how much time that really takes. And but I'm trying to apply similar methods of thinking to the game's development as well. So for instance, if I have to have cutscenes done, I've got a character sheet for the main character and some of the main characters that appear for Twilight Monk as well. So as I'm doing storyboards and as I'm working out elements of the story, you're going to see the character at different angles with different expressions. So it's important to have those kind of character sheets, whatever it is. If you're designing an animation, if you're designing a video game, if you're working on something where you've got a character in it, and you've got to draw that character multiple times, or if you have to inform other artists of a character and how they look at different angles, especially if they have a unique body type, such as the case with, Creed here. This is Mark Farley. He's the main character from the comic book Creed. And before you leave a comment about, does this have to do with the band or the Stallone movie or the Marvel character? No. Creed came out in 1993. It was something that I designed when I was a teenager. And if you don't already follow my channel, and if you don't already know, the short version is just that I made a comic book about myself when I was 16, and that launched my career as an artist. And that's all I will say about that in this video. Watch some of my other videos where I talk about what Creed is. And if you would like to read Creed, I've done several comic books. You can pick those up over on my Gumroad channel. I have them over there for super cheap in PDF format. And then I also have, there's physical editions of it available on Amazon and such. And as a side note, all of those old books were drawn completely on paper, like just hours and hours. Most of my life has been sitting staring at pencil and paper and ink on paper. That was my life for 10 years before I went and switched over to digital and started working in video games. And also, as a little side note, a little insight into, like, if you follow my channel and you like my art and you're like, oh man, I always wondered, why does Trent's art always look like it's kind of very line art heavy? Well, that's why, man, because like my roots have always been in comic books and indie comic books, and like I've always been indie at heart. And so even though I've worked at some of the world's biggest video game companies, I've always been indie at heart, and I've always been kind of like craving getting back to that. And so as I'm entering that age or that era of my life where I kind of get to do a lot more of just what I want, without all that, needing as much of employment, situations. Like I'm getting back to that like small team indie vibe. That's where my heart has always been. But this video isn't really about that. It's late at night. I'm just recording this at like 2 a.m. All right, let's get back to the topic. So one of the things that is very key to this process is to find that one cornerstone image. Find one image, if that means reworking an old image, or if it means really looking at and studying somebody else's drawing style, or something that you really want to capture. And it's like, this is how I want my character to look. Well, find that one image and then take your other shots at different angles, such as, you can make a list, by the way. You could write down like, this is when this character is really excited or happy. This is when the character is really, angry. This is when the character is really being sarcastic, or this is when the character's eating a burrito, or like whatever you might want to express. And I found that the more dynamic you make the character in the story, the more that the audience will connect with it and feel like, wow, this is like a real living entity, a real living person, and make the character talk like they're real too, and make them doing things that real people do, something that's very relatable. But the important thing is that you find just one. First, you start with just one image, and you're like, okay, so this is what the character looks like at that one angle, and then take a different shot at a different angle with a different expression, and try to line up the space between the eyes to be consistent. Try to line up the space between the eyes and the mouth to be consistent. Is the character's chin really pointy or really bulked out? Those are the things that you're looking for, and you want to correct them so that no matter who's looking at the book, they can kind of find some consistencies to it, and they can see that that's the character's unique look. Now, one thing that's a bit of a crutch that I've always fallen back on is giving a character a unique hairstyle. If a character has a very distinctly unique hairstyle from another character in your story, then there's never any confusion about who's speaking or who are we looking at there. But that's a bit of a crutch. And honestly, these days, I think that the expectations of the audience are very high. So the more intricate you get into consistency of spacing out features of your character, the better recognizable they will be. And then especially if they have like a certain way that they smile, for instance, and this is something that you'll see in characters from anime, or characters mostly in anime or manga. There's a very stern consistency to them whenever they're displayed. Another it's a bit of a cheap trick, but it's something that I've used for some of my characters years ago, is to have a 3D model of the character's face in a 3D program. And this is where it's helpful for you to be multifaceted. And oftentimes I talk about, hey, just learn some 3D modeling or something. And I know it's not easy, but if you can do that, or if you can maybe even work with a 3D modeler, maybe you can go onto some forums, hire even a 3D modeler to do a 3D model of that one touchstone image of your character, even if it's at just one angle. Maybe that can really help you to rotate the head in whatever 3D program you're using. If it's Blender, that's free. If you're using Maya, or I think even Clip Studio Paint supports 3D models in it now. And so you can rotate the head, and then you can draw around and trace around that 3D model of the head, so that your character always has exactly the same face, even if you're changing the expressions and you're changing the angle that it's drawn at. And if you even want a little bit of help with lighting, having a 3D model of your character can be very beneficial for that consistency factor. Don't apply too much pressure to yourself. Sometimes what's kind of interesting is that sometimes if you look at like Calvin and Hobbes, for example, the character kind of looks a little different from the side view. The Simpsons are the same way. It's kind of like a tweaked or a borked kind of a faking of it, as long as your character has those unique elements to themselves. And also depending on your stylization, you may choose to go extremely stylized and, drawing noses that are kind of like little ping pong ball noses, like they draw in some really cartoony type of styles. They fake it a lot. And sometimes, you just need to find consistency. And I've found that as long as you're consistent, people believe it and people can buy into it. It's almost like you're making a conscious decision to convince the audience of what it's supposed to look like based on how consistently you draw it. Anyway, if you're drawing a comic book, I certainly hope that helps you. I think I've drawn over 30 or 40 comic books from indie to working at Marvel. I worked at Marvel for a period of time. So I know a thing or two about drawing comic books. In the digital age, everything's totally different. You can really shave that time down an awful lot by working digitally, although then you don't have original artwork to sell. But I would recommend, if you're serious about drawing a comic book and you want to learn just about storytelling, this could help you also with storyboards for an animation. If you wanted to, go and check out my Making Comics workshop. It'll teach you everything you need to know, from coming up with an idea and how to confidently present an idea, to storyboarding it out, to creating thumbnails for your entire story, to writing your script and how to write better dialogue, everything down to just getting a physical copy printed and in your hands or available to sell on Amazon. This is a workshop that I made based on the Creed Reimaginary 60-page book. There were 2 of those 60-page books, so I should say 120 pages. It's like a 120-page book for Creed Reimaginary. And go and check that out if you're interested in reading some comics that have artwork entirely by myself. Over on my Gumroad channel, I have them in PDF, and I think you can also get those on eBay as well. And dudes, I want to thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, ciao.